Hello Ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to a VALHEIM news video. Today we're going to be going over a brand new interview that the creators of VALHEIM have given to IGN Australia, talking about some of the stuff that we've kind of heard from or know about over the last few months anyway, but there is some talk about the latest update, its impact, and whether or not we're going to get inventory space expanded in the future. We're also going to go over the continued impact of having a live service atmosphere in some of these games and expectations around updates. Despite some noisy opposition and maybe a little bit of correct criticism, VALHEIM's still doing amazing in terms of reviews. And it's all part and parcel of early access. This is what this game is for everyone. A little reminder that changes will come and go, and there will be many things reverted or gone one way or another. And it's all part of the process in making VALHEIM the best Viking exploration game it can be. However, if you don't like the way that things have gone about changing, well, there's a brand new mod that's going to change all of that back to normal if you really don't like the food changes recently. So we're going to cover all that. Let's go. Don't forget to like, make sure you're subscribed. And god damn it, I'm going to plug my 100 days of VALHEIM survival until I get to 5k views. Go watch it now. So, new interview with a couple of the Irongate developers, Robin, the main art guy, and Henrik, the co-founder of the studio. And they detail and go over some of your complaints, basically about the update maybe taking a bit too long, about some of the changes, and yes, what's going to happen with inventory. Are they going to be looking at it in the future? What I like about this interview, it does point out that a lot of survival games have had various amounts of time in between updates. Subnautica, The Forest, had months and months before updates sometimes. Pretty much every top 10 survival game on Steam at the moment has had various times where they've gone 7, 8, maybe even a year without an actual proper big update. The only exception to that might be something like Ark Survival Evolved, which they were kind of like the Fortnite of the survival early access genre. They had updates every single month, almost without fail. And that has also meant that a lot of you guys are kind of expecting that from every early access game nowadays. Let's go through it anyway and what they said. Basically, the amount of people playing made it really important for us to fix a lot of bugs pretty immediately after launch, says Henrik Tornquist, co-founder of the Irongate studio. No one anticipated that VALHEIM would become as popular as it did. It became pretty much right off our launch, so that was a pretty daunting task, making sure that everyone can play a game. So that's been said a few times now, and we've spoken about the fact that the devs really just were in awe of how many millions of people bought their game in the first month, and that just created so many more bug reports than they were equipped to handle. This isn't a huge studio, it only had 5 people at the time, and it's only gone up to maybe 8 or 10 at the moment. And that's how they're going to stay. They don't want to be the next Activision. They don't want to have 200 members of staff. But as of right now, and I'm sure for the next year and a half, this team is pretty much what it's going to be. But now they've learned how to process maybe some of them bugs and reports a bit better, and they've got systems up to date, and they've got more help doing it with their new staff they hired. I don't think we're necessarily going to run into the same sort of issues, if you want to call it that some of you guys kind of think there is. This is all pretty just normal stuff. I think we had internally said that we wanted to start working on Hearth and Home 2 weeks after the early access launch. That was the plan, at least, adds Robin Eyre, lead artist at Irongate. But I think we did it in the right way, because we need a good foundation to stand on, and we need people to be able to play the game, not to just push out content for a broken game. And that does happen a lot. My opinion again, look at Ark, they did add content every single month, and the game is one of the most buggy, broken games I've ever played. Like, it's playable, but my god, especially on console, it is absolute cluster truck sometimes how god awful the game is to navigate and actually enjoy. And that's because they never really focused as much as maybe we all assumed would be on optimizations and bug fixing. Sure, they did a bunch of that stuff, but it always was a case of just chucking content out there. I can show you interviews from way back when that I have gone over it in the past, where the devs literally said that early access is for putting the content out there, and they'll do a lot of the bug fixing towards its actual release. But Irongate don't want to do that. They understand the importance of making sure you have a nice experience whether or not you play it in early access or full release. Anyway, and we need people to be able to play the game, not to just push out content for a broken game. And even though we will still have issues now, I think it was the right choice. And also, it was a blessing in disguise as well, because all the players that did come to the game allowed us to actually find all the bugs we didn't find during the beta. And again, yeah, this is another point. They did have betas running. They had a beta running for ages. I applied multiple times. They did have a good few amount of people playing it, and you just can't catch every single bug in one of these games. So we all know the defunct roadmap. If you see this picture, I will keep reminding people, don't really pay too much attention to it. It's been changed, modified, All we do definitely know is that update 4, which was meant to be one of the last ones, Mistlands is going to be actually the next update. And in fact, we may get a bunch of these other things added in between. We had a roadmap at launch, Henrik explained, so we had a lot of updates planned, but we made the decision to scrap that and just go with a more of a dynamic plan for the game. I mean, we obviously have the large picture planned out, but with the new biomes and such, we found out having a roadmap wasn't really tenable for us, since we developed the game in such a way that there's always new stuff that we think about, and we didn't want to be shackled by those things. And also, the thing is, I think milestones on the roadmap seem a little bit bigger than they actually were meant to be, Robin continues. Like with ship customization and the Cult of the Wolf that was on the roadmap, they sound bigger than they actually are, so it doesn't mean that they're out the roadmap entirely, it's just that when we have time, we're going to push that stuff in out between the bigger content patches instead. Not try to hype it up or advertise it in a major way, just push it out to the people so they can test it and play with it. Instead of where Mistlands is the next big thing that we work on, it wouldn't make sense to just push that out as a little small update where you only get one enemy per week and then next week you get another enemy. That doesn't really make sense. So we just want to do it in a more organic way, Henrik says, finishing the thought. In a lot of ways, it's as if VALHEIM is mimicking the general survival game experience. Developing VALHEIM, it seems, is a lot like playing VALHEIM, where you put together these grand plans, you set out on your mission, then you find yourself doing something wildly different along the way. And I concur, Mr. Johab Gilroy. Now, because they work that way, they can actually go ahead and change things up. We obviously saw within the first day of the update being live, a lot of you guys weren't enjoying some of the values of the stamina foods and the health foods, and so they buffed them literally within like 2 days. And I think that's great that the developer actually listened straight away and said, you know what, you're right, let's tune this a little bit. It might still not be enough for some people, but I definitely think there's a case of some people just needing to get used to the new system a little bit. Because of how the food system now works, we were a little bit worried that it might be too harsh on some people, Robin explains, especially people who got into late game, who don't start from the beginning again. If you just go in late game, then you're at the plains and so on, and you eat some random food you find there, you're probably going to die. The balance patch, most people seem to be pretty pleased with it, Henrik explains. But that being said, we're watching closely what people are saying all the time. That's the attitude that drives Irongate. The team pay close attention to what the community is saying, and it informs, not drives, how they continue to develop the game. Interviewer points out that the cartography table and the obliterator are both community suggestions that were added into this update because of what the fanbase wanted. Now, the interview does talk about the fact that there's still no inventory management boost to the game at the moment, and with you possibly needing 6 types of different foods to maybe mix up your style on the fly, plus some buke berries, then inventory space is going to become even more of a premium. And this is a complaint I've got, it's a criticism I've had for ages, and it's even more apparent now with the food changes. So basically, when playing a survival game, I think one of the big choices you make is what do you do, what do you take, and what do you leave behind, Robin says. So if you ask me, I would struggle a little bit to try and give more inventory space because I think that's the choices you can make is more interesting. But obviously there is a limit somewhere, and when we feel that we have reached that limit at Irongate, I think a lot of players will have already reached that limit. But when we reach that limit, maybe we can have another look at it. This is a prime example of one of the issues where we want from VALHEIM and what our fans want is something we have to handle, Henrik adds, chuckling. Let's not fool ourselves, it's obvious that people want more inventory space and it's something we're discussing. So that is good news, and that to me says that I would expect their system where they would maybe have something like extra belts or backpacks or pouches that would give or expand some of the inventory space. That would most likely be added in future updates, and I wouldn't necessarily put it too far. It is probably one of the biggest complaints about VALHEIM. Of course, it is part of survival games, a true survival game where you have to make them choices about what's really going to be needed for that trip. I think it is important to have some of them restrictions, but I think that VALHEIM is kind of not in that same sphere. Like, we've already got issues where we want to carry more stuff like resources, and that can be a bit of a drag. I think expanding just so we can have a couple more slots, even if you kept the weight at the same, I don't think that would be the end of the world. Because it's literally a case of that sometimes. I'm nowhere near my weight limit, but it's literally I cannot carry all the different items I've got on just one single little run around maybe a Black Forest. So the interviewer says that he'd like to put the saddles on the tamed Loxon, make saddle bags for it, and then you could literally put your Lox on a actual ship and go across the ocean with them bags, only to have the serpent show off, destroy the boat, and send everything you ever owned to the bottom of the sea. Perfect, Robin says. No comment added Edinric. So there we go, a small little interview, but I think important to let people know they are thinking about it. They're not being obtuse. We saw them react and change the stats already. They will change the stats again, mark my words, before now and early release. they will mess around with food and some of the other stuff again. It just happens in early access. You will revisit it, they'll put more content into it and they'll think, you know what, yep, it still needs just a little more tweaking. What to me is exciting is the possibility that they are willing to listen to community, like add in the obliterator, like add in some of the other stuff, all based off what people want. And I guess that sets us up nicely for talking about this. Christopher Livingston put this post out on PC Gamer recently, and it pretty much just goes and echoes my sentiments that I've said in loads of videos, where we all kind of expect updates every single week. And the only games that are really doing that are games like Fortnite, like Apex Legends. Game studios that have over 300 people working at them, not 5 or 8 or 10. Minecraft, the biggest game in the world, is kind of relegated to just updating once a year now. Sure, they have test live servers that go out on their experimentals, but otherwise the content that everyone kind of gets if you don't subscribe to them test servers, it comes out once a year if we're lucky. The notion that we need content and consume it, I think, is down to a mixture of things. Netflix and on demand has helped foster this thing that you need to binge it all. But yeah, Fortnite and games like I said, Ark Survival World, where they had updates every month, have kind of made people believe this is the experience. You scroll down a list of all the survival games that are around. In fact, out of the games that have come out of early access, it's only really games like Conan, DayZ and Rust that update their game with content every few months. Ark Survival World barely adds actual new content to the game, it's mostly just balancing the fixes nowadays. The only time we get new content with Ark is when we've got a free map or the paid DLC, they'll generally add some free stuff for everyone there too. So you get the idea, it's not that common for an early access title. It's not even that common for a full game to have updates constantly. And as I pointed out at the beginning, some of the biggest and best rated survival games out there, games like Subnautica, they have spent a good few months without updates sometimes. I will keep campaigning, you may be sick of me saying it if you've been watching my videos regularly. I think people were just a little bit too harsh. It'd be different if VALHEIM had absolutely disappeared off the face of the earth, if they hadn't done any kind of hot fixes in the last 7 months. But they have, they've updated loads of times, they've got test servers running, they've fixed and added little bits, they've changed some of the art for some of the creatures, they've effectively done stuff in them 6 or 7 months while working on others. They've learned from their mistake that kind of come about through expectations and maybe just the success overwhelming them. And going forward, it sounds like they've got a good plan now about where updates are going to be. So yeah, we've definitely got to learn to give some of these games a bit more of a break. I think it's different when a game comes out fully. I think a game when it's charging full price and you know it's meant to be a live service game, I think then the expectations can be that you expect content. So like Rust on console at the moment is full price and it's dog shit. It hasn't had an update in 4 months that adds actually any new content. It's so different from the PC version, it's almost a crying shame. Now if none of that is convincing you, absolutely you don't like the sound of anything I said, you're not going to give them the benefit of the doubt, well, guess what? You can go and change some of the changes that you've seen recently. Hearth and Home Old Food Stats has been downloaded over 1,000 times already, and it effectively changes the food back to the way it was previously. And because they've changed all the foods back to normal, they've gone and revamped the foods again, the new ones that have been added, and pretty much made them balanced to have similar stats to what you've already got. You can also turn off the forks in the pictures, in the config files, or you can even go ahead and change your own stats for the food. So this sounds great, it sounds like, well, this is perfect, this is exactly what Irongate should be doing. But in reality, this kind of sucks. Like the whole point of the game is to take into effect the new combat changes with shields, with health. The fact that some of the values have changed too. I went over the secret stealth changes that weren't listed in the patch notes last week. And there's a huge amount in there that you can really see why possibly they rebalanced a lot of the foods. Because some of the enemies, some of the weapons, they have all had either buffs or nerfs. So by all means, enjoy a brand new mods that maybe makes things go back to the way it used to be, even though the game's only been out 6 months. But trust me, in the long term, I think if people use these kinds of mods too long, they'll just end up crapping on every single update that comes out from Irongate, because they'll be so set in their ways with one particular aspect of the game. It will snowball and they'll just be like, I don't like this, I don't like that, because it all comes from this base. That's why Irongate have changed it now. I probably will give this a try. I'll maybe do a little bit comparisons and review. We'll take a look at how it actually plays when you're going up against enemies and exploring and building. The whole point of the food balance system was to give you the choice, to give you the idea that you could become a stamina god, running around doing lots of building or just running from A to B. or you could become an absolute tank with your health and a big massive shield. You'd be able to take and defend against anything. There are still some balances with that. There were still some issues with knockback and shields and stuff that I'm experiencing, but as the interview said, the vast majority of people are happy with the update. I showed you guys they had a 2% drop in most recent positive reviews, but still 90% of all reviews in the last 30 days are positive. 95% of all time are positive. So don't ignore the noisy, shouty people that always cry the hardest. Some of their opinions can be valid, but don't take it too much to heart what they say, because clearly the proof is in actually the overall count. And the overall majority of people playing VALHEIM either don't mind these changes, or they're trusting in irongate to make it all good and it will balance out once we all get used to it. And there we go, I'm done, I'm dusted. That was longer than I should have been. I'll be back with more VALHEIM content very soon. I am about to start up my extra 100-day survival challenge, and I'm going to be doing more build live streams next week. Until then, rat bags, catch you later.